The wind howled like a wounded animal against the windows of the small, weathered house on Maple Ridge Road. Inside, Nia sat by the dying fire, wrapped in a thin shawl, trying to ignore the bitter cold seeping through the floorboards. Then came a sudden, frantic pounding on the door, sharp, desperate, echoing through the tiny cabin. Nia froze. The heavy iron fire poker slipped slightly in her trembling hands as she turned toward the noise. Her heart thudded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The pounding came again, louder this time, faster, more urgent. "Please." A man's voice shouted over the roaring storm, the accent distinct, sharp, and commanding despite the panic. "Please, my daughter needs help. She is fading." The sound of a deep male voice sent a jolt of panic through Nia's chest. She took a step back, clutching the poker tighter, eyes locked on the door. For a moment, all she could hear was the storm, the wind tearing at the shutters. Then, through the frosted window pane, a dark shape moved. A man, broad-shouldered, hunched over something smaller. Nia's mind flashed back to that night a year ago. Another knock. Another stranger with a story about a broken-down car. She had opened the door, and by morning, her grandmother's jewelry box and her hidden cash were gone. She had sworn she would never make that mistake again. But then, a sound cut through the wind. A weak, rattling cough from outside. A child's cough. Nia's grip on the poker loosened. Her pulse still raced, but her fear began to twist into compassion. She moved closer to the door, peering through the frost. The man shifted, and she saw the little girl clearly, limp in his arms, her face pale even through the blur of glass. "Please," the man's voice cracked, raw and pleading. "She is burning up. I have nowhere else to go." Nia stood there, heart hammering. Every rational thought begged her to walk away, but the voice of her grandmother whispered from years ago, "Child, when someone needs help and you can give it, you give it. Don't let fear make you small." With one deep breath, she turned the lock and threw open the door. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The man stumbled forward, snow clinging to his jet-black hair. But it was his attire that made Nia pause. He was not dressed for a casual drive. He was wearing a sharp, tailored black Mafia suit and a crisp white-collared shirt, now soaked and clinging to his chest, the top buttons undone. Even covered in snow, he radiated an aura of dangerous power, the kind of presence that usually commanded rooms in high-rise buildings or backroom dealings. "Thank you," he gasped, his dark eyes wide. "Thank you." "Get inside before we both freeze," Nia said, stepping back but keeping the poker raised. He carried the child to the couch by the fire, moving with a desperate tenderness that contradicted his sharp, lethal appearance. The girl's skin was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow. Nia locked the door, never taking her eyes off the stranger. "What is your name?" she demanded. "Ji-hoon," he said, his voice rough. "I am Ji-hoon. This is my daughter, Hannah." "Well, Ji-hoon, you better not make me regret this. Sit there. Don't touch anything. I have my phone right here, and I will call the police." Ji-hoon nodded, too exhausted to argue, though a flicker of irony passed through his eyes at the mention of the police. A man of his stature, a powerful Korean mafia boss, usually avoided the police for very different reasons. "I understand. I am not here to cause trouble. I just need Hannah to be safe." He peeled off his soaked suit jacket, revealing a white dress shirt that was nearly transparent with wetness, sticking to a muscular frame covered in tattoos that disappeared under his sleeves, markings of the syndicate. He wrapped the jacket around Hannah, but it was cold and damp. Nia watched him, studying his face. It was a hard face, angular and handsome, with eyes that looked like they had seen too much darkness. But as he looked at his daughter, the ruthless expression of a mafia boss melted into pure, terrified love. "I have towels," Nia said, lowering the poker slightly. "Stay there." She backed toward the linen closet, keeping her eyes on him. She grabbed an armful of towels and returned, placing them on the arm of the couch. "Take them slowly." Ji-hoon reached for the towels, moving with a deliberate, calculated grace, the movements of a man trained to strike, now repurposing his hands for care. "Thank you. I know you are taking a risk." You do not know who I am. I can heat up some soup, Nia said, ignoring his comment. That's all I'm offering. That is more than enough, Ji-hoon said quietly, beginning to dry Hannah's hair with gentle hands. Nia went to the kitchen, but positioned herself where she could still watch them. She dumped a can of chicken noodle soup into a pot. As she stirred, she glanced back. Ji-hoon was murmuring to the girl in Korean, a soft, rhythmic sound. The tenderness in his movements reminded Nia of her own father, a man who had worked himself to the bone to keep their family afloat. It was strange to see such gentleness from a man who looked like he could snap a neck without blinking. The power had been out for 3 hours. The only light came from the fireplace and 2 emergency candles. The house felt small, intimate. Hannah sipped the soup slowly, her small hands wrapped around the mug. Ji-hoon helped her, his intense gaze softening every time she swallowed. Why were you out in this storm dressed like that? Nia asked finally. You look like you were heading to a funeral. Or a very serious meeting. Ji-hoon looked up, his face drawn. Business. I was in the city. There are complications in my line of work. I received a call that Hannah was ill at her boarding school, 2 hours north. I went to get her immediately. I thought we could make it back before the storm worsened. I was arrogant. In my world, I am used to controlling everything. I forgot I cannot control the weather. Where is her mother? Nia asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's not my business. It is all right, Ji-hoon said, his voice devoid of emotion, his eyes darkening with a memory of violence and loss. She died 3 years ago. It has been just us since then. Nia felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. I lost my father 5 years back. It leaves a hole that doesn't quite fill up. Ji-hoon nodded slowly. Hannah is strong. Stronger than me. But nights like this, I feel I am failing her. I command thousands of men, yet I cannot stop the snow. You're here, Nia said firmly. You're keeping her warm. That's not failing. They fell into a silence that was less tense now. Hannah finished her soup and curled up against her father's side. Ji-hoon stroked her hair, his eyes heavy. Nia walked to the back room and returned with a thick, patchwork quilt. Here. It was my grandmother's. It's warm. Ji-hoon looked at the quilt, then at Nia. For a moment, the guarded expression of the Mafia boss cracked. This is handmade. Valuable. She needs to stay warm, Nia said. Take it. Ji-hoon accepted the quilt. His hand brushed Nia's as he took it, and a spark of electricity seemed to jump between them. He held her gaze for a second too long. Thank you. You have a kind heart, Nia. In my life, kindness is a rare currency. Just get through the night, she said, looking away. She settled into the armchair, determined to stay awake. But the warmth of the fire and the rhythm of the storm lulled her. The last thing she heard was Ji-hoon humming a melody, deep and mournful, as he watched over his child like a sentinel guarding a treasure. Nia woke to the smell of coffee. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside buried in white silence. In the kitchen, Ji-hoon stood by the stove. His black Mafia suit trousers were pressed as best as they could be, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and faint, intricate scars that told stories of knife fights and survival. Hannah is still asleep, he said softly as Nia sat up. I made coffee. I hope you do not mind. I found the beans. Nia rubbed her face. You know how to use an old percolator. I learned to make do with very little a long time ago, Ji-hoon said. He handed her a cup. Black, with a tiny pinch of sugar. I saw you do it last night with your tea. Nia raised an eyebrow, taking a sip. It was perfect. You're observant. In my line of work, observation is survival, he said darkly, then offered a small, disarming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. They were snowed in. The roads were buried under 2 feet of drift. Ji-hoon stepped out to the porch and made a call on a satellite phone he had pulled from his jacket. He spoke in rapid, commanding Korean. Nia couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the tone of a king, of a powerful Korean mafia boss issuing orders that would be followed without question. My driver will be here as soon as the plows clear the main road, he told her, returning inside. It may be late afternoon. As the day wore on, an unexpected domesticity settled over the cabin. Ji-hoon, the man who ran an empire of shadows, insisted on helping. He split firewood behind the house, swinging the axe with lethal precision. Nia watched from the window. He moved like a fighter, balanced and powerful. He fixed a loose hinge on the bedroom door and tightened the wobbly handle on the kitchen cabinet. "You're handy for a man in a $1,000 suit," Nia observed. "I grew up on the streets of Seoul before I rose to power," Ji-hoon said, not looking up from the hinge. "If you could not fix it, you did not have it. The wealth, the suits, the title of boss. That came later. Much later." By afternoon, Hannah was sitting up, coloring with some old pencils Nia had found. She drew a picture of the house, with a woman in the doorway surrounded by yellow light. "That is you," Hannah said shyly, handing the drawing to Nia. "You saved us." Nia felt her throat tighten. "It's beautiful, sweetie. I'll keep it forever." When the convoy finally arrived, it shattered the peace of the afternoon. These were not normal cars. 3 black, armored SUVs tore through the snow. 6 men in identical dark suits leaped out. They didn't just walk, they formed a defensive perimeter. When they saw Ji-hoon, they bowed precisely 90 degrees, shouting "Boss" in unison. Nia stepped back, eyes widening. This wasn't just a rich businessman. This was something else entirely. Ji-hoon waved them back with a sharp gesture of his hand. He turned to Nia on the porch. The air was crisp and cold. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing us as people. For opening the door." "Who are you really?" Nia asked, looking at the bowing men. "I am a man who owes you a debt," Ji-hoon said, dodging the question. "And I always pay my debts." Ji-hoon reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black business card with gold lettering. "Kim Trading Corporation" and a private number. Nothing else. "If you ever need anything," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Anything at all. You call me." "I won't need anything," Nia said, her pride flaring, though she was shaken by the display of power. "Life is long," the Mafia boss said softly. "And storms come when we do not expect them." He looked at her for a moment longer, as if memorizing her face, then turned. He walked to the waiting convoy, and his men instantly parted to let him through, closing the door with reverence. 3 weeks later, Nia's world collapsed. It started when the home health agency she worked for lost its county contract. Nia was laid off effective immediately. 2 days later, the diner where she picked up evening shifts closed down due to the owner's bankruptcy. Nia hustled. She applied everywhere. But the bills piled up faster than the callbacks. The heating bill came due. The roof developed a leak. She sold her grandmother's china. Then the dining table. Then her father's tools. 6 weeks later, Nia sat in her cold kitchen, staring at a shut-off notice from the electric company. She had $12 in her bank account and a jar of peanut butter in the pantry. Her pride had kept her going, but pride couldn't heat the house. She remembered the black card. She had almost thrown it away, terrified of what Ji-hoon represented, but something had made her keep it in the junk drawer. She dialed the number, her hands shaking. "Kim Trading," a woman answered, her voice cold and professional. I need to speak to Ji-hoon," Nia stammered. "Mr. Kim is not available. He is in a meeting with the elders." "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Tell him it's Nia." From Maple Ridge Road. There was a click, then silence. 10 seconds later, the line opened, and a deep voice